Everyone, and good morning from Washington, D.C. My name is Amelia Pierce, and I'm the Deputy Director for the Atlantic Council's Middle East Programs and the WIN Fellowship here at the Rafiq Hariri Center for the Middle East. I'm delighted to be joining you virtually today to welcome you all to the closing event for our UAE WIN Fellowship cohort for the year 2024, which we're hosting in partnership, of course, with Abu Dhabi Global Markets. This closing event also signifies that we are near the culmination of yet another successful year of the WIN Fellowship in the UAE. For the second consecutive year, with the invaluable support of the U.S. Embassy in the UAE, we've had the privilege of bringing together an extraordinary group of women entrepreneurs from across the UAE. These trailblazing women joined the WIN Fellowship with the shared ambition to scale their businesses, broaden their professional networks, and actively shape policies that empower women and entrepreneurs to drive meaningful change in the economy. During this year's WIN Fellowship cohort, we were honored to have participated in the Global Women's Forum in November, where our fellows attended 2 WIN Fellowship organized workshops, one on the power of networking, and one on how to integrate the SDGs into your startup planning. We also had the pleasure of leading, for the second year in a row, Abu Dhabi Finance Week's Women in Finance programming and events, reflecting our strong partnership with ADGM that we value so highly. And lastly, we also hosted one additional event at ADGM last month, where we discussed the various ways that innovation and startups are contributing to the advancements of smart cities across the UAE and the MENA region more broadly. With that said, I am so excited that today we'll be discussing another impactful topic that is really near and dear to the hearts of all of our team, and that I know many of you WIN Fellows are excited to learn more about. That is how visionary entrepreneurs in the UAE are driving cultural evolution, fostering cross-cultural collaboration, and pushing boundaries in ways that influence the MENA region and beyond. We will also shed light through the following conversation on the various initiatives supporting the startup scene's growth and tools available for founders to scale their businesses while contributing to the UAE's rich cultural heritage and advancing the region's fast-paced artistic modernization. Before I conclude, allow me to thank the U.S. mission to the UAE for supporting the WIN Fellowship and sponsoring our program for now the second year, in addition to ADGM's team for another fruitful partnership that demonstrates both of our commitments to serve as catalysts for change by fostering environments that nurture economic growth and innovation. And now, without further ado, please allow me to pass the floor to our incredible moderator for tonight, Lena Lampkin, Vice Chair of AmCham Abu Dhabi, and I'm very proud to say, WIN Fellowship alumna. Over to you, Lena.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm especially excited to be here among new WIN Fellows. I wanted to let you know that this program is an amazing program. It enables growth at all levels. And of course, our guests, thank you for joining us today. This program was enabled by the support of the U.S. mission in the UAE. So a big thank you to you guys. And also, we want to thank ADGM for hosting us today. They are the Atlantic Council partners in Abu Dhabi, and we do a lot of events. Atlantic Council does a lot of events with them. So the purpose of this panel discussion basically is, which is entitled How Creative Ventures Are Fueling the UAE Cultural Scene. You know, culture and the environment here has gone through a lot of transformation in the past. And now we see that this remarkable transformation has become a cornerstone for the nation's diversification strategy. So this discussion basically is to enable talking about how we grow, you know, our cultural capacity, how we support innovators, such as entrepreneurs within that space, and what is it that's happening right now that people need to know of. I would like to welcome our panelists. We have 4 amazing leaders that are at the forefront of this cultural evolution. And starting with His Excellency Saeed Nadari, Secretary General of Great Arab Minds. It's an initiative that was launched by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Prime Minister and Vice President of the UAE and ruler of Abu Dhabi. And basically this initiative of Dubai. Vegas of Dubai. Um, So this initiative highlights and celebrates the exceptional Arab scientists, innovators, and thinkers out there. Thank you for coming and joining us today. Next is Mrs. Natalie Habib, co-founder and executive producer of Link Studios, a powerhouse in film production, basically. And what they've been doing is they've been bringing untold Middle East stories to audiences at a global level. So we're going to be talking about that also. Dr. Pradeep Sharma, thank you for joining us, Director of Arts, Culture, and Heritage at the Salama bint Hamdan Al Nahyan Foundation. And you're shaping through a lot of the programs, the UAE's landscape through groundbreaking programs that we're all interested to hear about during this session. And of course, we have Zarina Atij, Head of Community at MISA, who's redefining how culture, industries, and community thrive in urban areas and spaces. We want to have a cozy discussion, and we would like to hear from you also as we're going through that discussion. We want to spark that dynamic conversation about the UAE's creative economy. You know, there's a big ambition to increase the GDP by 5%. We want to be able to have that conversation to see how the government and the private sector are working either together or alone in support of reaching that destination and goal. So I'm going to start by asking you some questions, but we're not limited to those questions. May the discussion begin. So my first question is for you, Your Excellency, and basically it relates to your extensive experience in the space of innovation and policy making. And you had leadership roles in the Arab Youth Center and Mohammed bin Rashid Leadership Development Center. So can you tell us a little bit from your experience, how or what frameworks and strategies do you think are very effective in enabling entrepreneurs within that space?
Well, thank you again for the opportunity to meet the fellows, and I'm very excited to know a bit more about their journey as well. When I speak about my job description or job title or responsibilities, usually I find it hard to explain to people what do I do on daily basis because it's so diverse. I work on way too many files. But then I always look at myself as an entrepreneur, but in a public sector setting. I enjoy turn ideas, transform them into a reality, transform them into targets, objectives, deliverables. And I think you guys are super lucky to be entrepreneurs at this year, because if you look at the 2025 and then zoom in the region, everything is working for entrepreneurs and everything is working for supporting entrepreneurs. A few years ago, I had the opportunity to work on a national entrepreneurship plan. And I'll have to tell you, it is very hard to map and visualize every single stakeholder in the startups or entrepreneurship ecosystem in the UAE, because it's too crowded. You have over 80 incubators. You have hundreds of mentorship programs, guiding programs. You have financial support. You will have also projects related to marketplaces, pitching events, accelerators. So just to visualize the whole ecosystem of a startup would be a huge, complicated task. And this is an excellent problem to have. Well, imagine people are working towards empowering you as an entrepreneur, developing your capabilities as an entrepreneur, and then supporting your startup to grow. They are chasing you to make money. They are chasing you to accomplish your dream. They are chasing you to help you advance when it comes to what you want to achieve as an entrepreneur. So it's an excellent ecosystem to be in. It's an excellent timing with everything happening with the advancement of technology. I used to work on projects where it took us time to work on the content, writing out the strategic objectives, filling out the website content and so on. You can do so now by AI in a few minutes. And everything became way easier and gives you way more time to do your strategic work and less time doing your operations. Cost became very also by your side because it became way easier to also hire people and hire individuals, or let also AI replace some of your task force. So I think it's the right time at the right location with the right group. If you have the determination to make it happen, it will happen.
Amazing, amazing. And talking about, I mean, this is the right time to be in for entrepreneurs to thrive within the ecosystem of the creative industry. I would like to move on and talk about a little bit about how do we assert our identity, and what does storytelling play in terms of telling the other about our story, you know, and telling them that there is this ecosystem here, and come and make use of that ecosystem because it's an opportunity for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me, and it's absolutely an honor and a pleasure to be here and to be talking again about something that I think, you know, being a co-owner of Blink Studios and myself working very closely with my partners to do what we've been doing, I think it's, you know, I'd like to draw attention to a word that I think is very unique and very strong in so many ways, and yet so simple to hear, which is story and storytelling. You know, storytelling tends to resonate with a lot of people. Stories are the best way to drive people to understand who you are, the culture you belong to, and the world you come from. And the better stories we put out there, the better chances we have of getting properly understood and valued for who we are as a country here in the UAE or as a region in the Middle East. And our driving force from the get-go, when we started back in 2005 in the United Arab Emirates proudly, and still till this day, so 20 years this year, that has been our clear mission and vision. How do we get people to understand the stories that we want to tell and to tell our own story? Now, in the world we belong to, or I belong to, we use a medium called film, right? And film today has taken on many different kind of routes and mediums, and, you know, and different types of genres and formats, but it's film, right? And when we talk about film, film has historically, through time, in the last 100 years specifically, before that there were other versions of film, theater being one of them, or poetry even before that. That creative medium is one medium that cannot default at sending out the right messages, because it doesn't just speak to the mind, it speaks to the heart. And if you are able to do that, the stories you create here in the world can go beyond its borders. And this is what we've been trying to do from day one, is how do we let people understand our stories? The UAE, I was born and raised here. So for me, seeing the evolution of the creative industry, I consider myself an extremely lucky human being. This doesn't happen except maybe every 100 years, that you get to witness the evolution of a creative scene. You've had it in ancient Rome, you had it in ancient Greece, you had it, if we want to talk about last century, we had it in New York. Now we have it here. And to be part of it, to go through the race of trying to make it happen is just more than thrilling and more than exciting. And the best part is, I have to agree with His Excellency, it has so much to offer. And yes, you cannot map it out. And even if you draw a map today, after you've spent so much time trying to figure it out, it changes tomorrow. And then you throw that out and then you go back. That's really, that impact that we are creating today is very appealing to the rest of the world. Because in my conversations, when I've gone out to the capitals of storytelling, whether it's in Europe or in North America, the resonance is how exciting it is to be part of this this ecosystem. And the idea is they would love to be part of it. Now, the job that we're doing is trying to relay that excitement in the stories that we tell. And that nurtures a lot of different areas and a lot of important things that need to be kept true. The one thing we should not lose, I believe, in when we get the stories out there is, yes, we need to make them global because they need to thematically resonate. You know, we've worked on a lot of things that represent the UAE, from what's going on with the cultural Saadiyat, island, and all of these things. And every time we went out to create a story, we started with a theme that people can understand. And then within that theme, we brought in the cultural nuances that define the country itself, whether it is the humor we bring in, that will be culturally nuanced from this part of the world. Whether we have character representations, storytelling, or story writing, we try to bring that in, but we don't overwhelm it because then we're going to lose attention. So we keep it under a universal theme. And I think this is the one key way of trying to create stories that actually can go beyond the borders. And I think that it is not done yet as it should. We're still in the process, but I think we should allow ourselves and forgive ourselves that time is still on our side. We've got a lot of time and hopefully we'll live out that time, but maybe we're going to hand it over to the next generation. But we're still young and we still have a lot to do and a lot to work towards. So my faith and in my belief in what the UAE is going to be doing and how it's going to impact not only its understanding, the world's understanding of the Middle East, but also the region, I think is key. And I see it happen in conversation with a lot of big entities that I've met with in Europe and the US. So I hope that gives kind of an understanding of what it is to do proper storytelling.
It actually does. We'll talk more about it. I have another question with regards to what the UAE government is doing within that space. And there's a lot of programs, initiatives, incubators, you know, specifically to support people, entrepreneurs that are working within that space. So Dr. Pradeep, can you tell us a little bit about what's happening and, you know, in Warehouse also for 42, what is it that you're doing and what can be done more, you know, and alluding to what His Excellency was saying in terms of the ecosystem, how do these programs and initiatives fit within that big puzzle?
I've got so many questions on what we've been talking. I think what we've been thinking about in the foundation is people. You know, when you think of our original mandate, it is how do we build a nation through investment in our people? And some of that is exactly what you're talking about, Atlee, which is how do we let them become the best versions of themselves? Mm-hmm. And so we work at that level of individual capability. So how do we build capabilities? And so to His Excellency's point, you know, we have a lot of activities for incubators, we have a lot of these going on, and some is just about clarity. And so things that we've been doing is we've been sort of breaking it into, I'm going to talk in generalizations, so I hope you don't mind. These are grossly general, they're probably not true and there'll be contradictions. But if we think about invention, innovation, entrepreneurship, we use these words interchangeably and we don't really know what they mean. But if you think about invention, invention is about the act of creating something new. And when you think about the behaviors that an inventor needs, it is research, it is a laboratory, it is space to make and test. And quite often when we think about the personality of an inventor, it is someone that's so focused on the object, and that's what they care about. Just because you've invented something doesn't mean anyone's using it. And so when we think about entrepreneurship, entrepreneurship is, technically speaking, a social term. It is about take up and how things are taken up and socialized in use. So let me redo that again. When we talk about innovation, it's about social. It's about socializing it and getting things used. Just because people have invented something and that's being used doesn't mean you make any money. And so entrepreneurship is the creativity around the business model. For innovation and radical innovation, we kind of need all three. So we need someone that's inventive. We need people that are making the new thing. We need the innovators that can socialize it, the sort of theatre of it. If you think back to Steve Jobs, who was arguably one of the most renowned experts in innovation, the way he stood up on stage and he pulled out the MacBook Air from an envelope, it's all theatre. And that's where the storytelling comes in. So how do we tell our stories in a way that's from here, not from Saudi, from Kuwait, but from here? How do we create products? How do we invent products that are from here, not from other places? So those are the things that we're trying to work on, is can we create a space where inventors can make, whether they're artists, designers, filmmakers, tech, we don't really care, because that spirit of invention is about the joy of making things. Ideally something new, ideally something that's going to change the world. So that's what the foundation's working on. So at 41, we have a number of programs that really encourage artists to inquire and create the next thing, invent. So it's really thinking of artists and designers as inventors. Then on top of that, we then start not encumbering them too soon, but get them thinking about, you've invented something, how do you know someone wants it? And so we talk about that innovation. We talk about, in the gallery, in the art world, how does one engage an audience? And so we will work with the artists to engage that audience. We have a new makerspace in MENA, in Mesa, and we have a new design studio. So we have a furniture fellowship called the FAF. And there we work with the artists to create new pieces of furniture. And we try and, they're at the invention stage. And then we will have a show so the audience can come in and engage with it. Then we talk about entrepreneurship. Then we talk about, how do you sell it? How do you build a business around it? How do you scale? How do you actually export? And some of that, then how do you do it with your own, so that you stand out in a crowded marketplace? There's very, very few people on the planet that can do all three.
Yeah.
And so the big thing we need to talk about is collaboration. So how does one, I suppose this is sort of the message, how do you collaborate? Because for you to be an inventor with that detailed mindset, for you to be the innovator, that storyteller, that theatrical, that's a different personality. Some of you may have both of those. Then how do you put a business model on it? And so those require us to collaborate. So one of the other things as foundation we try and do is, how do we learn to play well together? How do we talk to that artist that actually needs the gallerist, or the furniture maker that needs the supply chain?
Yeah.
And so we have to talk about those. So what the foundation's trying to do is, we're trying to work at that inventor end, because we need that fertile space for you to have ideas. We're industry agnostic. So depending on where we come from, we're interested in that mental space of just the joy of finding things out. Some of it may not go anywhere, but we're linked to it. What I love about what you're trying to do, you're giving people the time and space and money to research through inquiry. That's super interesting. And so when we talk about sort of new languages that have come out, how do we give a filmmaker, an independent filmmaker, the chance to make a film in their own unique voice, so that we can then add? And when you look at ecosystems, you look at what South Korea has done through music, fashion, makeup, film.
Right.
They all play together.
Absolutely.
And so how do we create something? So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. So looking back and introspecting at what constitutes that ecosystem, because this is where all industries cross.
Yeah.
It's not just one industry, but there's an overlap with a lot more. You mentioned supply chain, furniture. I mean, you know, there's a lot that goes into this. And you mentioned something, you mentioned Misa. So I'm gonna turn to
Perfect
Zarina and basically ask you a little bit about Misa, which is a neighborhood that fosters community and creativity.
Yeah.
But my question is, how do you balance basically enabling the creativity within a vibrant community as well as commercial viability?
Good question. I think first of all, I'll say thank you for having me amongst these incredible minds and storytellers and mentors of mine. Also to talk about something that I'm so deeply passionate about myself, right? I think as it's something we think about every single day with Visa is, how do we create a space where the creative businesses and individuals and collaborators that we meet are able to do what they do best, but also ensure long-term sustainability, which can only happen through a commercial sensibility, right? Sometimes viability, but also sensibility. Because I think as we talked about earlier, there's a patience game, right? So not everything happens, immediately. Sometimes we do have to wait. And I think we've done a lot of reframing, and Pradeep and I, and Aisha as well, like worked on this for several years together. There's a lot of reframing that we've done, right? So one of the first things that we've had to reframe internally is how do you even, I think we always think about them as either or. You can either be really creative or you can make, you can be really financially successful. And the reality is these things feed off of each other. So it only, when you truly create an ecosystem and a space where creativity can thrive, that attracts people, that attracts investors, that increases the value, right? Not only of the neighborhood's development, but also of the production that happens within it. The other big reframe we've had to make is how do we define value, right? So, I think in many developments, you often look for, who can pay the highest rent, right? And that is the person that can come and have the space. But for us, we've had to rethink value. And it's not necessarily always related to who is able to lease a space within this neighborhood in order to produce creative output. But we realize you have to have a mix. Some people, the value that they bring in is cultural, it's creative, it's innovative, it's about the way that they think or a process that developed. So we then start to think about that balance of having the larger enterprises or businesses, because they provide jobs, they provide gigs, they provide opportunities. And at the same time, you bring in the creative minds because they are the ones who are almost like reinventing that wheel or showing us a new way of doing something or telling a story. And then the last one that I will say is around flexibility, right? And I know Pradeep, you said kind of the joy of finding out. That is something that we have to think about a lot, right? And because sometimes you have to meet people where they are, right? In order to support them in growing. And what we found is that oftentimes it might not mean, immediately running towards a space lease, but it's about providing an opportunity to do a quick pop-up. How do we are the ones who are kind of sliding into people's DMs every week because we're like, you're doing something really interesting. Like, what is this new product you're developing? You've started a supper club. Can we come and try it? Are you interested in opening a restaurant? So we kind of have to be at that front end of really be experimental and being brave a little bit about the people that we are finding across Abu Dhabi, and allowing the space for them to have very low barrier to entry for their experiments, right? And then only once they go through that is when you say, okay, now you're ready to take up a space for 25 years. So for us, all in all, it's, when we talk about that commercial viability versus the kind of the creative output, it's, we believe, I think truly pretty can speak to that as well, is if you do invest in people and in their businesses really early on, and you create that right balance, the value will follow, right? It's, the question then is when, and I think that's something that we have the responsibility to continue to manage. But again, sorry, the last thing I will say is we've found ourselves having to code switch. The way that you would speak to shareholders and investors has to be very different than the way that you speak to the artists and the creators, right? So we kind of, that left brain, right brain is always a conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Zarina. While you were talking, it came to my mind that one of the critical thing and issue that, and it's a discussion, it's a recurring discussion, is how do we monetize art, right? How do we enable the young artists to continue, in their passion and make a living out of it? And what policies are supporting, so that discussion that takes us to thinking about what is policy driving and what's taxation doing, within all that discussion, and how are we really supporting, be it corporate or individuals, to have art collections and to support, those artists. This is something critical, and I think it's in the core of our discussion. If anyone would like to say something about it, Dr.
Certainly. I think, so something that Zarina's grappling with, that we're all grappling with, is that we have such a dominant financial economic model. And so some of these terms, like return on investment, internal rate of return, do not help with other economies. And I use the word economies on purpose because economics is about the flow of things. And so money flows, and that's how certain financial economies work, but also ideas work. And so how do you create idea economics? Because that measure is not the same as an IRR. And arguably IRR, these are not useful measures for the health of creativity and innovation. And so we have a number of issues around how do we support and challenge those other behaviors. And so when you look at art in particular, and art is one of these problematic areas where we see it as an asset class. And as an asset class, we get very quickly into how do you sell it. Art isn't a problem solver. Art is a question asker. And so quite often, the best art shows you go to the Biennales. So Sharjah Biennale is on at the moment. Some of that will sell, but that's not its purpose. And arguably, the best art is the one that challenges you to look back on your society, look back on you as who we are becoming. And so I think Biennales become really important. And so then it's incumbent on us as a community to support those Biennales. So how do we turn up? And so I think there's a role of government to support them. There's a role of patrons, and there's a role of us as audience to go to them. And so I think if we're going to support artists in its broader sense as genuinely a method of research and inquiry, and if you look at sort of any technological innovation that's come, it's been an art practice. So when I think of lasers were a scientific experiment that were in the laboratory for nearly 50 years before they became useful. So how do we let people find spaces where they can just inquire about the world we live in, the way we talk to each other, the way we engage with plants? You know, there's Superflex have a beautiful public art installation about interspecies design. How do we design habitats for fish? It's not economically viable yet, but it could be. And so we need to support that end, and the main financial models of that is patronage, but it's also us. And so I think, you know, the more we go into those, and when you look back at moments of intense creativity in cities, it's when people were inquiring, it's when these places were allowed to happen, whether it's through music, whether it's, and so those gatherings become important, and the audience for those gatherings become important. I mean, one of the examples I love, and it sort of goes back to your point, Natalie, was back in the 1500s, this group of people got together in Milan. They call themselves Camerata de' Bardi. So the Bardi was the sponsor of it, and Camerata is a made-up Italian word about a gathering. And they were trying to reinvent what they thought was Greek theatre. And for some bizarre reason, someone said, I think they sang it. They invented opera. And as they had an audience around it, they were supported by de' Bardi as a patron. And so if we are going to try and create these spaces for new forms, we need to support them. And so I think there's a role in that. Foundations play a role. I think individuals play a role. There are a number of high net worth individuals also supporting artists. So I think all of that helps. But I think we need to try and see art more than just an asset class that can be bought, stored, and sold at later times. So how do we do that? How do we actually see it as a genuine reflection of someone's ideas and thoughts about the way we're living on this planet?
Yeah.
I mean, just to add on to that, just a small little example, just to go back a little bit in history. The Medici family, okay, they were bankers. And let's just imagine ourselves at that time, right? They were just regular bankers, and they put out RFPs, requests for proposals. And Leonardo da Vinci and all of the rest that became what today we think and resonate with as the biggest and most important artists were responding to a request that was being funded by a family of bankers.
Procurement was rubber.
Exactly. And I think that that's in itself is, you know, when you look at that as the essence of what makes art live through time and what makes art, you know, the word struggling artist doesn't come just because, you know, artists struggle with their own feelings and they're all about the creativity. That's not what it is. Artists struggle because they are good at what they do. They just don't know how to let the world understand it and appreciate it. And to say it's simply pay money for it. That's the biggest issue that artists deal with. And that's where it takes more than one person to help support that ecosystem. And it takes a back and forth conversation and understanding as to the value that is being built around art and why art needs to be supported. Because yeah, we could look at it as, yeah, it's an installation, it's a painting, it's this artist who has done an expression of something that relates to a cause or a message, but that's not truly what it is. It is more than that. It is an expression of time and generation. It will define who we are for the next 100, 200, and 300 years. And 300 years from today, they'll be speaking about a specific family in the UAE who had supported the arts, and from it came 1, 2, 3, 4 names, whoever they may be. And then it's going to be this romanticized story, right? It's a romantic story, but in true fact, it's RFPs. And it's procurement, and it's patronage, and it's financial models, and it's for the value, the cultural value of, and the intangible value of what makes a country and its people go forward and resonate and create legacy, which is what needs to be done. Creative, with fueling a creative economy, it's to create a legacy.
I just think, just building on that, I mean, for me, we don't travel to other cities around the world to go and look at a bank account. We get to look at culture, we get to look at art, we get to look at
Museums and all that.
buildings.
Absolutely. But you mentioned, Natalie, something that's very important. After 100, 200, 300 years, we're going to look back and see, what did the UAE do?
Absolutely.
So that's a question to you, Your Excellency, basically, you know, with the creative industry and supporting the creative ventures, not only to drive economic growth, but how can they maintain and, you know, amplify the culture and the UAE element in it? What is it that the government is doing to support that end?
Well, there are two sides to this, and I think one side is, yes, empowering and raising requests for art, culture, and projects, RFPs, and so on. It's one important element to the equation. But then there is also another part of it. It's, where are the ideas coming from? Who are ready to turn these ideas into actual products, actual startups, actual art pieces, culture? I think there is still a huge hunger when it comes to looking for projects that represents the identity of this region, and especially the UAE. That's one. There is a huge space, an ocean of opportunities. We still didn't use much of that space. Like, look at almost every element: filmmaking, strategic storytelling, branding, designing, stuff that comes from our culture, singing, musicians, visual artists. Try to name entrepreneurs, local-based entrepreneurs and successful startups. Yes, they are, and they are growing, but still there is a huge opportunity to double and triple and have hundreds of that number grows by year. I think the most important part is to be original when it comes to designing your product or your service or build your startup. A few months ago, I met an entrepreneur. She was pregnant, and as a pregnant woman, she was craving two things. One was chocolate, second was kunafa. And she decided, Sarah, a pregnant woman, she decided to mix both products. She decided to mix chocolates with kunafa and create a chocolate bar called Fix, because to her, it fixed her craving.
Yeah.
She started to sell it to her family members, to her friends. Then, like any family or like any friend circle, they decided to encourage her to sell even more because they enjoyed that chocolate bar. And then she went and moved from her small kitchen at home to a very small cloud kitchen that is almost half of this room or even less, to start creating bars and sell them online digitally without even having a restaurant or a store. Now, I think I don't know if anyone even don't have an idea of what Dubai chocolate is. I think go anywhere in the whole world, to ask them about Dubai chocolate. They will tell you it's a chocolate that's filled with kunafa. And it started from a single entrepreneur who turned an original idea. The world maybe had enough Belgium chocolates and they wanted to check and try to taste something else. So they are all now moving towards Dubai chocolate. Now you have the biggest brands who used to be the legends of chocolate actually introducing Dubai chocolate's flavor. If it tells you something, if we take one wisdom of this whole story or this whole entrepreneurial journey, is that people wants to see original ideas. People are will be your biggest fan if you turn what you love into something they will love or they will enjoy. Look at the best entrepreneurs in this region. They are people who loved what they do. They represent what they do. They didn't force that love to happen. Usually what happens is when we think about being entrepreneurs, we go and see, oh, what's trending nowadays? Is it AI? Or is it a specialty coffee? Or is it fintech? Or is it blockchain?
What problem are we trying to
Yeah.
solve?
And then we try to randomly connect dots and connect lines between that trending element and us. And sometimes that line doesn't work. That love relationship doesn't work with that certain area. If you don't understand what blockchain is, or you don't enjoy blockchain, or you don't understand explaining blockchain, like many who I meet, they don't even have an idea what is blockchain. You don't need to force yourself to be an entrepreneur and have a blockchain or a crypto investment. You don't need to force that to happen. But if you enjoy music, go and do something. Because I myself, for example, when I led multiple teams on projects, I hate stock materials. I never use Shutterstock. And every single image that I post publicly, it has to be an original image. I don't like to go and pay for something that anyone can have access to. I like to be original when it comes to our content. Even when it comes to music, I usually work with many local musicians to come actually and design a music for the brand that I work for. I'll give you an example. The Greater Minds is a project I'm currently busy with. It became the equivalent to Nobel Prize, but in the region. The most prestigious award an Arab person can ever get in the region. It's a 1 million prize. It became very exclusive for one reason. It comes from his own Sheikh Mohammed, who became also a role model in sending hope for this region and show that there is a bright part and there is a half-filled cup of this region. It's a very positive message. Second, I think what many of the Arabs have faced during the past 20 to 30 years, their confidence became too much damaged and questioned and shaken. Because of the conflicts we have lived, because of the situations we have been in, the Middle East went from one war to another, one conflict to another, poverty, unemployment, instability. It all caused it shaked some of their confidence because they noticed if they set into a different environment, they usually get to be successful. But because of some of their environments wasn't stable that much, they felt that the problem is in themselves. And this is the biggest problem to be in when it comes to lifting up this generation. So the Greater Minds came to do one single homework, which is to recognize people and give them that pat on the back and tell them well done. And usually this doesn't. I don't know why it was everyone's homework, but no one did it. Look at Zaha Hadid's interview, for example. She designed one of, I think, multiple buildings that became the world's most beautiful buildings. Iraqi female entrepreneur. She got recognized almost everywhere, but not the Arab world. And you'll get that. The clip is there on YouTube. She sadly speaks about how many Arabs didn't give her the recognition she was looking for. So we came and we decided that's enough is enough. It's time to recognize our people. We shouldn't wait for a committee in Sweden. We shouldn't wait for a committee anywhere in the whole world to do our job, to recognize our people. So this award became very noble by its idea. Everything, every part of it was designed by Arabs and the entrepreneurs in the region as well. So the trophy itself, Yasmin Al-Mulla is a very well-recognized designer. She designed the trophy. It had engraved some of the wordings from the Syrian civilization, which had back then became the first ever civilization to start writing. And we had that in the trophy. The music itself is by an Egyptian musician, an entrepreneur again, who also designed the music for the brand, the logo, and everything around it, the stage, the gala dinner, the ceremony. And I think what made this award very successful, because it's an original award, it fits our needs and requirements. So imagine if you multiply this towards almost every single initiative, and you go and gather all these storytellers, all these artists. This year, for example, the winner for the arts category was Lia Al-Azawi. Lia Al-Azawi is 83 years old, a young person, an artist. I met him twice this year, very energetic. He had artworks everywhere. Google him, you will find him in the British Museum. And he has retold the story of the region through modern art. So usually when we speak about Arabic art, we think about calligraphy and we think about very traditional art pieces. But Leah comes from a contemporary modern art, visual artist, telling the story of the Arab world. So I think there are multiple entrepreneurs, multiple artists. Now is the right time to shed the light on them. Now also it's the right time to think where are the opportunities. Just last week, I met an entrepreneur who saw an opportunity in tourism. He told me, I get to see and interact with many tourists. And usually they ask me for places where they can have more interactions and engagement with the Emiratis. So he designed a platform called Meet the Locals, basically to connect tourists with the Emiratis. What a simple idea! What a simple challenge to have. We are there. I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes we don't connect dots. It's not something that comes with a cost. Basically, you connect a tourist with an Emirati person over a dinner, over a meet and greet event, or maybe a museum experience. And now he's selling his startups apparently for millions. Just look around. What are your problems? What are your family's problems, or co-workers, or colleagues, or classmates? And you'll find a way to turn these problems into solutions. And once you do that, someone will appreciate that, someone will value that, and someone will respect that. And suddenly everything will come. Fame will come, money will come, attention will come. And I think before everything else, self-respect should come to yourself.
Thank you. That was very, very interesting and inspiring. And speaking about, how this award, this very prestigious Arab award, was initiated from the UAE. So the initiator is the UAE to the Arab world. That is telling about the UAE, right? And this is something that also, when we think about the heritage and the culture of the UAE, it's actually also how things are done here. It's not the speed of how things are done, but it's the spirit of how things are done. And that preservation is not just about preserving the culture and preserving, the way we talk and walk and sinner. And, it's also preserving that mindset of doing something for the larger good, for the bigger good, and for the region that looks like us. I think this is fantastic. This is.
If you'll allow me, I'll just add one to
Please,
this
go ahead.
mindset. One thing that I notice every time I meet an entrepreneur or someone who is into entrepreneurship, many come and complain that, oh, by the way, that was my idea. Many come and complain, to be honest, I was the first to think about this idea. And let me tell you something that's a bit realistic, and I'll use the example you used for. How many do you think thought of being the Silicon Valley of the region? How many cities thought of that? I think there are over 10 cities in the Middle East who wants to be the next Silicon Valley. How many thought of being the hub, the business hub, or the bridge between the West and East? Also over 10 plus cities. Almost every idea that we see around, I'm sure someone somewhere for some time thought about it. But then what makes the UAE the Silicon Valley of the region? What makes the UAE the hub and the business hub and the culture hub of the region? What makes the UAE the safest, the most secure, the cleanest, in my opinion, the best place to be on earth? Is not the idea, because everyone can come up with this idealistic ideas. I think hundreds and thousands of years, there was this idea of the ideal city. In the books, philosophers spoke about it. What makes it is the ability to deliver and to walk the talk, as you say. I think what makes the UAE leadership very unique is that if they will say we'll organize the best ever COP event, they will deliver COP28. If they will say they will organize the best ever World Expo, they delivered World Expo 2020. If they will say there will be an airport 5 years from now, the airport will be there 4 years, in 4 years' time. If they will say they will build a whole island, you will see that island and people will queue to buy properties in that island. So I think if you have that mindset as well as an entrepreneur, that ideas, everyone has ideas. The currency is not the idea, but is how to turn that idea into a deliverable and how to maintain that credible character. Someone who say, if he plans or he envisions something or he dreams of something, he deliver it and get it done. If you manage to do that, you will have that spread.
Amazing. Win Fellows, raise your hands. I think I'm one of you ladies. This is very inspiring to all of us, right? As women, female entrepreneurs, and as women with ideas and trying to do something about it. And actually, some of you already have something in place, and hopefully it will grow and scale the way you want, inshallah. Thank you so much. This is amazing. And speaking about mindset and preserving the know-how and the how we do things, and it's very, very important, to also recognize the efforts that are done to preserve the culture and identity, and I'm interested to learn more about what MISA is doing in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when we talk about cultural preservation, particularly, we tend to think of it sometimes with a lens of like nostalgia, right? As someone again like you, Natalie, was born Abu Dhabi, raised in Abu Dhabi, there's so much nostalgia. But it's really important to recognize that cities are not static, right? Cities evolve. Abu Dhabi on its own has, 4 million people living here. The dynamics of the city change so much. So it's really about how do you evolve with kind of with authenticity, right? To who we are. I'm just taking notes on some of the things people were saying, and a lot of it really is some of the work that we do. One of our incredible leaders and mentors, in the casual conversation once said, before you work with someone, have 3 million. right? And that advice was more to say, get to know the person, get to know the character behind the business, get to know them, understand who they are, what their values are, do they have a drive? Before we look at an amazing deck of, that you put together and all that, let's really talk and understand who these people are. And that is something that really is like, so we have made it one of our kind of core procurement rules, right, is to actually get to know people before we work with them. And we've made it almost like an unspoken rule within the team to work with those who are in our ecosystem, right? So we don't go after the massive architecture firms and let's work with them because they know how to do this thing with their eyes closed. But we're like, okay, who are the mid-sized homegrown businesses that are from Abu Dhabi, from the region that we can work with, give this opportunity to. And what we found, how that contributes to cultural preservation is that it is actually really, truly, really, and truly for the people, by people. It's no longer these kind of outsiders or massive corporations who are mass designing for us or mass thinking for us, but it is the individuals who have that specific problem who say, okay, you want me to design an office? I've been looking for an office for the past 10 years, like this is exactly what we need, right? In addition to that, there's also a sense of community ownership that comes with that. So when we look at the project now, whether it's through the spaces we're building or the businesses that are popped up or the movie space or whatever it is, we've almost turned all of them into ambassadors without putting them through any kind of ambassador training or anything like that. It's just a way that you engage with people really early on, listen to their ideas. I can't tell you the amount of focus groups that we've held and talk to people really about what they want to see within Visa. And then the key is implementing that. The key is not just we're going to get you in this room and listen to you and then go do what we were going to do anyways, but they're able to walk down the streets and say, I was there when we decided that building should have windows or it shouldn't, or I was there when we said this is what a communal Ramadan looks like for us, right? So it's just, I think it's authenticity through really, to put it really bluntly, is like, as an organization, our responsibility is to put our money where our mouth is, right? Yeah. Is to do the things that we stand for, even though they might feel difficult, they might feel a little bit convoluted, they might be a little bit, we're kind of wobbling through it sometimes, right? But the reality is, at the end, when people can say, I've contributed to this, then it is authentic to where we are today, rather than us kind of sitting in an ivory tower designing on our own.
Absolutely. I mean, we can go on and on and on in this discussion because there's so much to discuss and cover. And I guess with the collective experiences here, I mean, the things that would come up would be just fantastic and take a long time. However, I was given that we're out of time. So I would like to open the floor for questions. If any of you Win Fellows and our guests would like to ask any questions, please feel free to ask.
Hi, my name is Adia. I'm a double entrepreneur and a working full-time engineer in the R&D and the innovation. But and I'm not talking about struggling in terms of ideas. We have ideas. We've built our businesses. The government has supported us, but we have issues with development, the developers, and how they want to eat away from your profit regardless of what you make. This TOR is a nightmare. And on top of that, if you want to expand in a city other than your own, there is this bias, and they would want to give let's say the sped up red carpet kind of treatment to the people in certain emirates that people from Abu Dhabi do it from Abu Dhabi. People from Sharjah would have to stay in Sharjah. And and even when you want to grow, you just don't know where to turn up. Like, who's the person that can help you grow your business, scale it up correctly? We don't look at trends, and we don't want to be trendy. We want to set up communities, and this is what we basically most of the workers suffer from: expansion, taking it to the next level, connecting with someone who understands the business and wants to elevate that.
Thank you, dear. Anyone would like to say something about this?
I can, you can speak about your part, but I'll speak about myself. I think it's very important, Alia. I don't know a bit about your business, but it's very important to also, again, look for someone who would value what you're doing. I know it's not easy And sometimes, as you say, people are biased to the companies they are used to, or maybe the companies they are comfortable working with. Myself, I enjoy working with different startups, and I actually go walk the streets, sometimes explore Instagram pages just to look for an artist or someone who locally designs something. It's something that I enjoy doing myself, in the smallest details to the biggest projects. Last year we had uh, I was tasked with a project to elevate different locations creatively. You would notice there is a huge shift in tourism and also economic value worldwide. People used to think you'll need to build way more buildings and towers to build a successful destination. Nowadays, people, especially after COVID, they are looking for experience. They are looking for people, for areas like Qasr al-Hassan, where they can live a story, they can explore different activities or experiences, or like the Circle Avenue in Dubai, where you can walk and look at the galleries and so on. In Dubai, we had an example where Hatta was transformed completely. We didn't build towers or buildings in Hatta. Hatta, when it comes to the KPIs and targets, 200% increase in number of visitors, an increase of number of entrepreneurs and startups. And we did the same with multiple locations. So last year, we worked on different pop-ups in a place called Al Marmoon in Dubai. It used to be empty sand area. Now it became, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful locations I ever saw in my life. Beautiful golden sands with lakes, with pop-ups and entrepreneurs. And there where we worked with multiple business owners who knew how to design pop-ups, we knew how to design brands, we knew how to design experiences. And that's on a corporate side. I do it myself on a personal side. When I used to design my own villa or my own place or a farmhouse that we used to own, I usually look for entrepreneurs because I want to tell also the story of the place I'm creating, that there is this entrepreneur who worked on. It makes the story way more original and way more compelling when you actually lift up people. Even the outfit itself, it's designed by an Emirati entrepreneur who designs our outfit. Imagine like the opportunity here. We wear this outfit for over 50 years. I met an entrepreneur who makes the lightest agal ever, and it is made of fiber optic material. And just imagine the opportunity. This is something we all wear. We all want something lighter in our head, and he designed that product. So I think if you match someone or someone who has budget is important, someone who has a bit of authority, so he can't sign off your contract. It's not always easy to find that single person, but if you find it, I think try to have that long-term relationship with. And I'll leave it to you to speak from your perspective, but I can't speak on.
I would like to add to what His Excellency is saying, because I think he touched on something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs miss on when it comes to entrepreneurial initiative and thinking. Entrepreneurial means it's yourself getting involved on creating an idea that you want to put out into the world that eventually becomes a business. Technically, it can and it cannot, because the fact that you invented doesn't mean that everybody knows about it, right? I think one of the things that a lot of entrepreneurial people forget that is part and parcel of the success of their business or their entrepreneurial dream is how well they deliver their stories and how far they go in communicating what is the passion, the drive, and the actual model, or what is the vision that they see. And I think that in a lot of ways is the missing part in what an entrepreneur falls into the trap that, oh, we don't have enough to support us, versus an entrepreneur who says there is a lot to be supported with, but I'm going to go find my way and find my direction in terms of how I'm going to make it happen. One of the things I've learned in entrepreneurial thinking, and I've learned this from a not a fellowship, but a course I took in MIT, they always say the best entrepreneurs are the people who find their champions. You need to find your champion. You need to find the person who will champion your innovation, your entrepreneurial idea. Because sometimes it's not possible for you to be able to be everywhere at the same time doing what you need to be doing. But the more you tell the story that you have in the right way and you build champions around you, they will champion your story. And then one thing happens after the other, just like the Dubai fix. I mean, who would have thought? Chocolate and kunafa was going to become a global trend. I'm not talking regional, not talking national. It's global. It's crazy, but it happened because there were champions around this woman who thought, "What am I doing except getting a fix?" And then suddenly that fix became a global trend. So I think that's an attitude, and that's story-based attitude. And I just want to say one thing is that I wish we can introduce into the educational curriculum of children from the get-go how to tell their story. Public speaking, I think, is a heavily important part lacking in all the Middle East, because that's the only difference that stands between what we have to offer and what they just tell their story better. They stand up on stage and they know how to tell it. We know how to do better things, but we just, when it comes down to telling our stories and getting champions around us, I think we still struggle and we stumble. And I think that's only going to be sorted if we get it as part of the curriculum from day one, from when they're young. That's my thoughts on this. It will resonate.
To be honest, I almost want to. It's the same answer that you both gave, right? I think it is about finding your match, and the reality is similar to what we do when we purchase a home. There are developers who develop for luxury. There are developers who develop for sustainable practice, sustainability. Even within, what Miza is doing, yes, we are building these spaces, but the project is not a development project. It's not a real estate development project. It's a part of a kind of a wider nation building agenda about the support of creative entrepreneurs. So I would position Miza more as a community building initiative. We're looking more for certain cultural behaviors, for entrepreneurial behaviors. We just happen to be building space that we can funnel these businesses into, right? But that's not necessarily the place. So I would say, when I look at some of the commercial developers, a lot of them will promise you thousands of people in footfall, and that's why your rent is so high, or they'll promise you all sorts of things. It's a very different conversation that leads us. So I would again, as Your Excellency, you mentioned, and as Natalie mentioned, it's about finding your match in terms of space. And I would say let's have a conversation. I'm going
to take a slightly contrarian view, because I do think I find here that because the developer mentality dominates, we tend to go to maximizing returns on real estate. And so even when we start, D3 is a classic example, even when we subsidize, very quickly those rents go up and we over gentrify. So I share a lot of your concerns, because I don't think we hold on to that long enough. And I think that this is where places like Miza needs to hold on to that nerve, because it is, if I just look at the price of real estate going up in this country, we're absolutely proud of it at one end, but it's a nightmare if you're trying to grow your organization, because for you now to move into a bigger space, where do you go? So I think that there's one point there where I think that developer-led model is starting to change. But we've grown in the last 30 years by development. And so that model is dominant. I think that's one thing. I think the other thing that's also interesting for me coming in is our zoning needs to change. So we are a city of cities. So, you can only go into media city if you're a media. That is starting to change. I think Miza on purpose was designed to be sector agnostic. And I think you'll see more of those coming, but it is hard. So I think there are pain points there. And so I think we need to acknowledge that. But I do think it's finding there are people coming that aren't just looking at maximizing their IRR at 16-20%. They are coming, but it's not as easy yet. So, we're seeing that in residential as well as commercial. So, hang in there.
Thank you. Hang in there, and all of you hang in here because we're going to continue the discussion over the networking reception outside. With this, we conclude our panel discussion. We wish we had more time, but I think let's move on to the other side and continue our conversation. And of course, for you to meet and to have direct conversation with our panelists. Thank you so much for coming in, and please join me.